Now, there are a couple of people, of course, who are angry about this ceasefire, who think that even just the ceasefire itself is already too much of a concession to Russia. One of them is CNN's favorite foreign affairs analyst, John Bolton, who a lot of liberals have come to love as well because of his criticism of Donald Trump. Here he is on the CBC when asked about his view of this ceasefire. Here's what he had to say.
So now, for more on all of this, we've reached John Bolton. He's a former U.S. National Security Advisor and a former U.S. Ambassador to the UN. Welcome. Thank you for making time for us.
Glad to be with you.
Now, neither President Zelensky nor President Trump will attend the talks between the Ukrainian and U.S. delegations that are scheduled for tomorrow. So will peace be attainable if one side has to make all the concessions here?
Well, I think the best that could come out of these meetings in Saudi Arabia is to try and get U.S.-Ukrainian relations back on track. I expect that this minerals deal will be signed. I don't think that will have much impact on anything, frankly, but it's important to Trump, and he can declare victory, and that might pacify him for a while. But I think the real question is not specifically what this meeting will accomplish, but how Ukraine and the rest of NATO will deal with Trump's essentially 180-degree reversal of position, basically to be supporting Moscow, which has dismayed many people in the United States, as it has throughout the alliance.
And then here is the Democratic Senator Chris Murphy, who, as we've shown you before, not only was part of the effort in 2014 with Victoria Nuland and John McCain, the National Endowment for Democracy and U.S. aid, to go to Ukraine and encourage the anti-government protesters who eventually forcibly removed the democratically elected president, but he boasted about the fact that the United States played a critical role in getting in driving out the elected leader of Ukraine. Here is what he had to say. He's still a very vocal and vehement supporter, like almost all Democrats are, of U.S. support for the war in Ukraine. He said this, quote, "Let's be clear what happened. Trump cut off arms and intelligence sharing, putting Ukraine on the brink of defeat in order to get Zelensky to support a Russia-designed, quote, ceasefire that essentially hands Russia huge amounts of Ukrainian territory with no Russian concessions." Now, none of that makes sense. There has been no ceasefire. The Russians haven't agreed to one. The idea that this is what they wanted seems preposterous, but there's obviously going to be an attempt, if Trump ends up facilitating a end to the war and a peace deal in Ukraine, as he campaigned on doing, and the American people ratified that in an election. If that ends up happening, I'm telling you now what's going to be the narrative, which is that even though it's the case that there's no chance that the Ukrainians could win this war, certainly not as NATO defined victory, or even from any kind of perspective, the Russians are going to continue to occupy more of their country if the war goes on. More Ukrainians are going to be killed, more of the country is going to be destroyed. Even though that's the case, if Trump ends up succeeding in facilitating a peace deal in Ukraine, the narrative is going to be that Trump essentially parachuted in, prevented the Ukrainians from winning, and handed Russia everything that it wanted, and that Russia won the war not because it was winning anyway and would have won inevitably, which is true, but only because Trump, being enamored of Putin or being a Russian agent or a traitor or whatever, ended up giving everything to the Russians. I think the good thing about Trump is he no longer cares about those kinds of claims. He seems genuinely committed, to me, to trying to end the war. I think he is less naive and less easily manipulated now than he was in his first term, but there are still a lot of smart people in the Trump administration around Donald Trump whom Trump trusts, who I do not think share Trump's view of foreign policy in general or the war in Ukraine in particular, and there still are doubts, in my mind at least, about whether they will again succeed in sabotaging Trump's objectives, even though their oath and their duty is supposed to be to carry out the policy of the elected president. And I think that's the real interesting aspect of what is going on with this 30-day ceasefire. Maybe it's an important step toward diplomatically ending the war, or maybe it's an attempt to derail those efforts and to try and keep the war and U.S. support for it going. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.